I can.
Al, are you doing all right?
So far, so good. You guys have a safe trip there and back.
Bob, how you doing?
Pretty fair, Jerry. I've got just some nagging things like we all do at our age, so I certainly can't complain. How are you? How are you, Jerry?
Doing all right. Can't complain. Nobody pays attention when I do.
Now everybody's on. Wait till it begins.
Another cop pulled over a truck.
Jerry, was that a figment of my imagination?
No, clearly. Clearly, I'm a figment of your imagination.
There we go. He's right
Oh,
back
that's
at
so
you.
great.
I love this part of it because especially when they start talking amongst
So
themselves.
whose nose are we looking at? Who is that?
The new. Yeah,
What's that?
I think
Even
it's her
if-
nose. Put a pin in it and see if we can see.
That is so close. I think it's bigger. It's.
Hello, Jim. I don't think you can hear me.
She's
Just being silly. Yeah.
Oh, it's like Tim's getting started. Good seeing you.
Joe,
Hey,
how you doing?
I'm doing very well. How about you?
Doing great. I gotta get some lunch sometime.
Oh, I do. Yeah, I do. Occasionally.
I'm almost at that Yeah, and you. You're on the same building? No, no, I just had.
So go.
It's been.
All right, good afternoon, fellow Rotarians. Welcome to the August 2nd meeting of the Rotary Club of West Jacksonville. Zoom attendees, please mute yourself and submit any questions you have or comments via the chat or unmute yourself and let us hear from you. Today, our invocation will be given by Joe Eberly, followed by Jeff Ludwig leading us in the pledge.
Please bow your heads. Creator and sustainer of all that is or will ever be, accept our thanks for this day and all its blessings. We ask that you guide and direct our club, its leaders, and our actions. Grant that each day, each of us may feel a responsibility to Rotary, to our community, to our country, and indeed to all countries and peoples. Bless our fellowship today and bless this food to the nourishment of our bodies in your service. Amen.
Gentlemen, please face the flag and repeat after me our pledge. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you very much, Joe. Thank you very much, Jeff. Thank you to John Barley for greeting everybody today prior to the meeting. Go ahead and start with pop-ups. Mike O'Brien has a pop.
Thank you, Mr. President, and great to see Mark Lansing here, back to our club. No better, a veteran supporter, military supporter than the Jaguars, Mark and Chad. I'm looking forward to your talk, sir. All right, today's the day. You're gonna have to swim out to the red beach, but please put on your swimming fins and you can leave a little early. It'll be out till 2:30 this afternoon. So after the meeting, please give the gift of life. This club has been fantastic over the years, and Tom's done a fantastic job leading the committee. So the need is great, as it always is, and Rotarians, please step up and give blood if you can. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Tom. And the bus is actually on the other side of the parking lot, you know, from where we're used to it. So please be advised of that. Next week, there will be no lunch meeting. We'll be kicking off our evening socials right here in Timuquana. So please RSVP if you plan on making it. We certainly hope that you do. The cost is $15 per person. It's going to be a big part of our new membership initiative and that sort of thing. So please bring family, bring friends, bring anybody with an interest in Rotary, and we would love to have them. Like I said, RSVP on the DAC-DB calendar or reach out to Patty. RLI is in Orange Park on August 12th. Please be sure to register on the DAC-DB calendar if you're interested. The Vibrant Club Seminar is August 26th in Orange Park. There's going to be important breakout sessions regarding membership, the Rotary International Foundation, and public image. Public image, of course, being something that our own Marshall Butler has been so instrumental in getting up and off of the ground. All members are invited to attend. So once again, please be sure to sign up via the DAC-DB calendar. This week's Family of Rotary report, Rotary report will be given by Carl Dawson.
How y'all doing? We have two birthdays. Edward French's birthday was yesterday, and Lorraine DeJohnny's birthday is tomorrow. Some happenings. Paula Bell and his wife Ann took two of their grandkids and their mom and dad for their first trip to London, Paris, and Amsterdam in early July. I don't know if they brought them back, but Joe Everly and his wife took a week-long 200-mile bike ride through the northwest coast of Ireland. Wow. Might have noticed he was walking a little funny when he got back. Also, his grandson Weston has been signed by the Chicago White Sox. Wow. Mark, is there something that you would like to say?
Yes, I have. Now,
Okay.
thank you, Carl. It's my honor and pleasure to announce that one of our own, Drew Derek Bisbee, who's not only an expert in the field of martial arts, but also he put on the U.S. Karate Association, the World Martial Arts Games in Daytona Beach. It was attended by over 300 competitors, as well as over 1,000 people from 13 countries throughout the United States. And our very own was in charge of that entire tournament and that entire effort. And so, and he's my sensei too.
Before I go, I want to tell you about a man, his wife, and his mother-in-law went on vacation to the Holy Land. While they were there, the mother-in-law passed away. The undertaker told him you could ship her home for burial for $5,000, or you could bury her here in the Holy Land for $150. The man thought about it and said, "We will just have her shipped home." The undertaker asked, "Why? Would you spend $5,000 to ship your mother-in-law home when it would be wonderful to bury her here and spend only $150? The man replied, "A man died here 2,000 years ago. He was buried here, and 3 days later, he arose from the dead. I just can't take that chance." Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Now over to our Sergeant at Arms, William Milne, to introduce our guest, Disney Merchant.
Thank you, President Dane, and thank you all so much for being here and for braving the rain. It is my honor to introduce our special guest today, President Dane Jensen. Would you please introduce your two guests?
Absolutely. First up, we have Seth Roebuck. Seth is a colleague of mine at the law firm of Southfield Shad, very good friend. Please introduce yourself to Seth. And for the third time, we have Pierce Gibney. Pierce is also a very close friend who played right next to me on the offensive line at Georgia Southern, all that good stuff. Please welcome Pierce.
And Mr. Scott Emery, you have a guest today?
After I brought my beautiful white rose.
And I myself have a guest, my colleague and wonderful friend, Ms. Jill Moore, who is also a former member of the Southjax-Rotary. Welcome. I have no busy Rotarians today, so this is my report.
Okay, thank you, William. All right, now it's a pleasure to bring up Tim Johnson to introduce today's speaker.
President Dane, esteemed members of the Westjax Rotary, and your guests, today it's my pleasure to introduce a distinguished guest, a visionary leader, a trailblazer in the realm of professional sports management, Mr. Mark Lamping, president of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, for nearly 3 decades, he's been an experienced executive in the field of professional sports. Mr. Lamping has left an indelible mark on that industry, first taking this helm at the Jacksonville Jaguars as president on February 13th in 2012. But his career also includes noteworthy achievements such as serving 13 years as a marketing executive with Anheuser-Busch, 14 seasons as president of Major League Baseball's St. Louis Cardinals, 4 years as CEO of New Medellin Stadium Company, And under his watchful eye, MetLife Stadium, home of the New York Giants and New York Jets of the NFL, was successfully constructed and operated, culminating in the Giants' Super Bowl victory in 2012, making Mr. Lamping one of the rare sports executives to have received both a Super Bowl ring and a World Series championship ring. That's a big deal by itself. Right there. And this was all earned during his time as president of the St. Louis Cardinals after their triumphant 2006 season. Now, in his role as president of the Jacksonville Jaguars, Mr. Lamping leads all team business operations and spearheads Shad Khan's driven initiatives, including bold events in the Jacksonville Shipyards development, which is a pivotal part of the first downtown Jacksonville campaign. His involvement extends internationally as he serves as a non-executive board member of the Fulham Football Club in London, Khan's premier league club, where he contributes to the ongoing expansion of the Riverside Stand and the Fulham Pier project at Craven Cottage, both set for completion in 2023. Under Mr. Lamping's astute direction, the Jaguars are on the brink of achieving even greater heights. A testament to this is the construction of the new state-of-the-art football performance center, the Miller Electric Center, scheduled to open this month, July 2023, which will serve as the new home for all Jaguar football operations. Furthermore, the team has undertaken a series of major fan-friendly enhancements to TIAA Bank Field. Notably, among these are the installation of the world's largest video board in 2014, the complete renovation of the club sections, the construction of a 5,500-seat Daly's Place amphitheater in 2017, and numerous amenities that have transformed the stadium into a national destination for top sports and entertainment. Ladies and gentlemen of the West Jacks Rotary, please join me in a warm welcoming of this visionary leader, president of the Jacksonville Jaguars, Mr. Mark Lamping.
Well, he put some effort into that. That goes above and beyond. Most of it was true, but it's a pleasure to be here. And Mike, I appreciate your kind comments. I had the privilege of getting around town quite a bit and speaking to groups, and I always enjoy the opportunity to speak to Rotarians, not only because of the great work that you do throughout the community and have done for generations, but also the fact that you've been such a big supporter of the Jaguars. Many of you as season ticket holders and as an organization. We work very closely together on Rotary Day each year, and it's my privilege to be here. Hearing all those great things about the stadium, I don't know why I'm wasting all my time and energy trying to replace the damn thing. So the opening of the Miller Electric Center was really significant for the football organization. It now has finally given us the opportunity to be able to move all of the football staff, players, coaches, scouts out of the stadium where we're in very cramped quarters and into proper sized NFL training facility, which certainly will improve our players' ability to develop, or trainers' ability to rehab players, and just be much more efficient in the way that the team's able to conduct its business. And if any of you have been to any of the practices that have been open over the course of the past couple of weeks, it's a much more comfortable environment for you to watch practice. Shaded stands, fans above those stands, so it's a very comfortable experience. The restroom, permanent restrooms, concession stands, and the pro shop. But one of the reasons it's so significant is it really does open up the opportunity of how we seek our solution for what's going to happen long-term with the stadium here in Jacksonville. This is shocking to many, but if you took every NFL team, all 32 teams, and you put their stadiums in, one of 4 categories, what you find is that most of those teams have moved into new stadiums since the Jaguars came to Jacksonville, close to 30 years ago. And then there'd be another group of teams that have done hundreds of millions of dollars of renovations to their stadiums. And then there'd be another band of teams that actually left their cities to go to another city to solve their stadium problem. And then there'd be a couple teams that currently have agreements with their local governmental jurisdictions to build new stadiums. And then there would be the Jaguars. The Jaguars are the only team that really hasn't done anything significant to their stadium since the team came into the league. That surprises most people. Back in 2016, we really started talking about the need to make sure that we come up with a long-term stadium solution. And the reason that was so important is we want to make sure that the Jaguars in the city of Jacksonville don't get anywhere near having to face an issue that would be brought about by the team's lease running down and then not having a stadium that would justify an extension of that lease, and then not having a solution for the stadium. And, because that's what happened in St. Louis, that's what happened in Oakland, that's what happened most recently in San Diego. So, we wanted to get way ahead of that. So we started talking about it back in 2016. Just over 3 years ago, we started a formal program in partnership with the city of Jacksonville to try to seek a solution, a long-term solution, to make sure we have a stadium that will serve the needs of the community, of our fans, and of the team for decades to come. So that program we kicked off in conjunction with the city of Jacksonville 3 years ago began with an assessment of the stadium. The good news about the assessment of the stadium was that we didn't find anything structurally wrong with the stadium, and that was a real important revelation, because if there's nothing wrong with the structure, it opens up the possibility that you might be able to renovate the stadium to address the many needs that stadium may have. So once we realized a renovation was possible, we then went to our customers, and we went to other stakeholders like the University of Florida, University of Georgia, the Gator Bowl, went to concert promoters who bring events to stadiums all across the country. And we asked them, what are those things that we could improve in the stadium that, number one, if you're a Jaguars fan, make your visit more enjoyable, that if you're with the University of Florida, University of Georgia, would convince you, even more to continue this great tradition of the Florida-Georgia game here in Jacksonville. The Gator Bowl in a position where perhaps they could become a serious contender to be part of the expanded college football playoffs. And then concert promoters to just bring more events to downtown Jacksonville. Went through that process, came up with a list of about 25 items. Many of them wouldn't surprise you, like getting shade on all the seats, particularly on the east side of the stadium, where it can be terribly uncomfortable, particularly during August and September. Wider concourses, so it's easier to get around. Improve what's known as the vertical transportation, so when you arrive at the stadium, it's easier for you to get to the various levels. And that list went on and on. We hired eight architects from across the country. I gave them that list and gave them 4 months to come back with their concepts in terms of what they would do to the existing stadium to be able to address as many of those needs as possible. Narrowed that down to one. Hired a construction manager, basically a large general contractor that has done major stadium construction and major stadium renovation. Had that general contractor work alongside the architect to make sure what they were designing could be built, that we had an idea what the timetable would be, what the sequencing of that construction it might be, and what the rough order of magnitude cost that would be. And then we released it to the public. So that was about a 3-year process. And what you saw a couple weeks ago, I guess it's now 8 weeks ago now, when we released the concepts for the Stadium of the Future. That was the result of this program that we worked together with the city of Jacksonville over the past few years. The next step in that process was to go out and talk to the public, and we did that beginning in the middle of June. We just completed the process last week. We had 17 what we call community huddles that basically were held throughout the entire city of Jacksonville. We had them during the week, we had them on weekends, we had some on a holiday, we had them at lunchtime, we had them at early evening, and it was a great process. We got in front of well over 2,000 people, and the intent of that process was pretty simple: to share more details about what the Stadium of the Future project is all about, answer any questions, and receive any comments that anyone would want to offer. The programs were all about the same, almost exactly the same, other than the time of the day they were happening, the day of the week, and the location. We gave, in fact, I handled all of them, gave about a 40-minute presentation, and then we opened it up for questions. We didn't screen any questions. We didn't limit the amount of time people had to ask their questions and provide their comments. And we didn't cut off questions until all questions were asked and all comments were voiced. And on average, and this was what impressed me so much, these question and answer periods last on average 90 minutes. We had some of them last over 2 hours. We had people that were very engaged. And we've now gone through that process. We published a report about 10 days ago, sent the report to the mayor and to the president of the city council. It basically was a copy of our presentation. Although many city council members took time out of their busy schedules to attend some of these community huddles, we had a section on the most frequently asked questions and what our responses were. And then we also included a current assessment of the stadium. So not only did we provide that to all the elected officials, we also posted all this online. So there's a website, which is firstdowntownjacksonville.com, is where we post all the information we share with the city and all of our plans as it relates to downtown development. So at this point, we're waiting to have discussions with the city to see if we can come up with a plan that works for the city, that works for the residents of Duval County, that works for our fans, works for the Jaguars, and just as importantly, it has to work for the NFL. It's sort of an unusual process as it relates to the National Football League, but it's no different than the process that this community went through over 30 years ago. The result was bringing the team here to Jacksonville. An individual team owner cannot unilaterally commit to play their games in any city for any period of time without the approval of the National Football League. And along with that approval, it mandates that it's put to a vote of all 32 owners, and you have to receive 75% concurrence to give the team approval to enter into a lease. So as we go through this, like I said, it needs to work for the city, it needs to work for the residents, it needs to work for us, it needs to work for the other stakeholders, but it also has to work for the National Football League. And that's important because you'll hear a lot of discussion as we go through this process of, okay, what did they do in Buffalo? What did they do in Nashville? What did they do in Baltimore? What did they do in New Orleans? How did those communities that were able to solve their stadium issue, how did they get that done between the local government and the city? Because that's what many of the NFL owners be interested in, is the Jacksonville agreement, potential agreement, on par with what other small cities have done to keep their team. So that's something we have to keep one eye on, but really need to keep two eyes on, finding a deal that works for all the Jacksonville related parties. And I'm confident we'll get there. We'll begin negotiations over the path forward, from what I understand from the mayor, sometime at the end of this month. There's really no deadline. The only deadline consideration is if we don't get an agreement by a certain point, then we're not going to be able to keep to the construction schedule that we've laid out. which means in almost all likelihood, the costs are going to go up. So in order to keep the schedule that we've laid out, which would suggest that we would begin construction in earnest at the end of the 2025 NFL season, so say February of 2026, you do the renovations in a continuous fashion, be complete in time for the 2028 season. And if we're going to keep to that schedule, we probably have to have an agreement no later than the second quarter of next year. We also have a checkpoint, which is actually this October. In order to continue the development of the plans that we need to stick to that schedule, we need to start spending about $1 million a month this October to keep the design moving forward. And, you know, depending on how we feel about the tone of the negotiations and our confidence level that we'll get to a successful agreement that works for all parties, we'll make that decision whether we're going to continue to fund that. If we had to make that decision today, we would make that funding decision. Shad would make that funding decision because, like I said, as we sit here today, we feel confident and we feel optimistic because fundamentally, both parties want to get something done. Both parties are aligned in terms of what their interests are. You know, Jacksonville is really, really important to the Jaguars, and the Jaguars are important to Jacksonville. And when you start with a shared commitment to try to get to a yes, then generally you're probably going to be pretty successful as long as you are willing to live in a state of compromise and be really creative in trying to meet the needs of the other party. So that's where we are in the process. And as I said, we feel good about where we are. There was some commentary that questioned why would the Jaguars bring forward this major initiative just a couple of weeks before a new mayor goes into office. Okay? In fact, one local media wrote that Shad Khan was playing hardball with Mayor-elect Deegan. What the author doesn't know is that both Shad and I had conversations with all of the leading mayoral candidates when they were candidates. And we shared with them what the timetable was. This is a 3-year process and it's going to reach its conclusion sometime this May or June. And what we'd like to know from you is if you're elected mayor, when would you want to deal with this? And both candidate Deegan, as well as the other leading mayoral candidates, they all said the same thing. They said they would want to deal with it right away. So while some people may have been surprised that, you know, we announced this plan, you know, in late May, Mayor-elect Deegan at the time was not one of those parties that was surprised. She knew exactly what was going to happen, and we had talked about it. There was also a reason during this last mayoral campaign, neither the Jaguars nor Shad Khan provided any financial support or even publicly supported any of the candidates. For the first time since I've been here, we sat out this mayoral election. We just didn't think it'd be appropriate to be involved in terms of donating money to one campaign or to multiple campaigns, and then turning around and sitting across the negotiating table on, you know, what would be one of the largest, public projects completed in downtown Jacksonville, and at the same time would be the single largest private investment in the history of downtown Jacksonville. You know, so there's a lot of talk about, you know, how's this going to be paid for? Are tax dollars going to go into it? If so, you know, what extent should or could tax dollars go into this? You know, to set the stage for that. And I think most people understand this. You know, the stadium you see down the river is owned by the city of Jacksonville. The city of Jacksonville has the responsibility to maintain that facility. They have the responsibility to fund the capital improvements. And if there's a decision to replace that stadium, fundamentally, it's the city's responsibility to do that. Now, in this particular case, you know, the city does have a willing participant who is prepared to invest hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars into this publicly owned stadium. And in addition to that, committing to that city that, you know, they will continue to play their games in that stadium for a long period of time. So that's the big debate. So this could be an unprecedented level of investment in tax dollars. At the same time, and any investment tax dollars should receive the highest level of public scrutiny. Okay. And while I think it's a great idea, people that may not share my view, they don't have to worry about it because I'm not one of the 20 people that's going to have any influence whatsoever on what the elected officials decide to do in terms of their investment to, replace the aging stadium. So that'll come through the normal review process. And, at the end of the day, there should be focus on that. And without getting anywhere near trying to offend anyone, don't lose sight of the fact that, Shad Khan is willing to invest $1 billion in downtown Jackson. And most of that going into publicly owned facility, which is the stadium. Okay. And the list of people that are prepared to invest $1 billion in downtown Jacksonville right now consists of one person. There's no one else. I'm not being critical. There's no one else in this community that maybe has the financial. There's many that have the financial capacity, but they may not have the reason to invest in downtown like Shad does. They may not share the belief in downtown like Shad does. And one of the things about having an NFL city is they always come with a really wealthy owner. That's just it. They do. So if you have an NFL team, you're going to have a really wealthy person, or persons that own that team. And some people take exception to that. Okay? The other side of the coin is that you have a person who has significant wealth that has a vested interest in your community, even if they don't live there. And if you take a look at the city of Orlando as an example, they have a publicly owned stadium, just like Jacksonville. It's an aging stadium. It's called Camping World Stadium. It's the old Citrus Bowl. They are moving forward with, they're proposing to invest about $800 million to upgrade this publicly owned stadium. And because they don't have a permanent tenant, the only party that's going to invest in that Orlando stadium will be the public. Now, they have a totally different situation as it relates to the amount of tourism taxes that they generate in Orlando. So they have a more robust public funding source in Orlando. But juxtapose that to Jacksonville, where you have the same issue, publicly owned stadium, aging stadium, needs to be upgraded in order to continue to keep the types of events that you have. And the city of Jacksonville has a partner that's willing to share the cost with them. So as we go through this, it's been really interesting just trying to make sure that we look at both sides of the debate as it relates to the stadium in the future. The comments that we got during this public review process, it was a tremendous process. It was really useful for us because we learned a lot as we went through them. And that learning has been applied to our plan, and we've made modifications to the original plan we announced to be responsive to what we're hearing from supporters and opponents alike. And if anybody attended any of those community huddles, you can attest that the way we approached it was right off the bat. We said, don't pull any punches. What we really want to hear from you is your honest feedback as to what you think about this entire process. And we certainly had a mix of people that think it's a good idea and others that don't think it's such a good idea. Okay, and all were treated in the exact same way. But if there is a highly held belief that there is this overwhelming majority of people in this community that don't think it's a good idea to replace the stadium and think it's a good idea that stadium continue to remain owned by the city of Jacksonville, then you would be mistaken. There are a lot of people that support this. This is going to be a really intense debate. to go through, and there's very strong feelings held on both sides of to what degree should tax dollars go into a city-owned stadium. But you know, as I've encouraged opponents of the project, is to stay involved in the process. If you think this is a bad idea, let your elected officials know about that. If there's a hearing at city council, show up for the public comment, let your voice be heard. And for the people that support it, we've asked the exact same thing. And you know, one of the things that tends to happen sometimes with projects like this is that you know, there is a vocal minority that can dominate, you know, what the whole comment process is. And I'm not saying whether that's pro or con. I'm just saying sometimes when you have debates, it can be a vocal minority that looks like it represents the entire community. And you know, what we want to do on something like this, because it is a big issue. Okay? It is an issue of significant importance, you know, to the city of Jacksonville and to the Jaguars, of course. And you know, while you may do a public poll that says, should tax dollars go in to improve a stadium for a billionaire NFL owner, that's generally not going to poll very well. Okay. But if you ask that, if you in that same poll say, is it a good idea to have a National Football League team in Jacksonville? Well, you're going to get close to 90% that are going to say, yeah, I think it is a good idea that we have an NFL team. The question is, what's the cost of having that team? So it's been a really interesting process. It's going to continue for quite some time. You know, we remain very optimistic, you know, that we'll reach a workable solution. And we really can't wait to get started. And really, the ball's sort of in the city's court right now. But again, we're not putting any pressure on the city to do something today or tomorrow. I know that the city council has hired a consultant to work with them as they would evaluate any deal that would be negotiated by the mayor's office. And the mayor's office is currently interviewing consultants to help them. And we think that's a wonderful thing, that the city is seeking help to bring people in that have been in these situations before, that have represented cities, that have assisted them in their negotiation with a National Football League team regarding a stadium. That really helps us, to be quite honest with you, because absent them getting their own independent information, we would probably end up doing the city's due diligence for themselves. And that's never a good situation to be in, because then people will wonder about the transparency or the validity of information that the Jaguars would be given to the city. So then the fact they're going out to get their own consultants, we think that's great. You know, what we have talked about as we've gone into this is it would really help everybody involved if there is, you know, sort of a process that's defined that we know how this negotiation is going to unfold. We know that the mayor's office is responsible for managing the lease agreement between the city and the team. And that's why, over the course of the past 30 years and from the very beginning, the lease is negotiated through the mayor's office. Okay, there was the original lease that was done about 30 years ago. There's been 18 amendments to that. About half of those under Wayne Weaver's ownership, the other half under Shad's ownership. And every single one of them went through the same process. The team negotiated with the mayor's office. And then if they reached agreement, the mayor's office then introduced legislation at the city council for the city council to take up that matter and ultimately decide whether they would advance that bill so the lease could take effect. What we hope is that there is some cooperation between the city council and the mayor's office, because there's going to be such great interest in this agreement that if we're not careful, you could end up negotiating a complete deal with the mayor's office only to have to renegotiate the entire agreement, you know, in front of the city council. And that's not a good process. Certainly not a good process for us. It's just in terms of, you know, you really want to know where the finish line is and not constantly be dealing with the moving finish line. But as I said, we feel good about where we are. We feel good about the commitment of the mayor. You know, just to sort of summarize this now, ask any questions you might have. It's a good time to be dealing with this issue. Okay, Jacksonville's on fire. A very, very strong financial position right now. Now there's a lot of needs in the community, but the city has tremendous financial capacity right now. The Jaguars are ascending. We're seeing something really interesting happen that many people in Jacksonville have been talking about over the course of the last 20 years. And that is, you know, the Jaguars are a new, relatively new football team. A lot of people that are blessed to call Jacksonville home aren't from the state of Florida. You know, we came from someplace else. And we were fortunate enough to land here. And many people arrive with your football allegiance already determined. So now you have all these young kids that have grown up while the Jaguars have been here in Jacksonville, and they're now in their late 20s, mid 30s, late 30s, early 40s. That the Jaguars have always been their team, and we are finally seeing, and we refer to it as Generation Jaguars. But just to give you an example, at the end of last year, the average age of our season ticket holder was just under 55 years old. Okay. This offseason, we have sold a significant number of new season tickets, almost 15,000 new season tickets. The average age of the purchaser is 32 years old, which is great. That's what you really need. So what you're going to see is the average age of our season ticket will drop from the mid-50s to the mid-40s almost overnight. And that's a great indicator. So we've got a lot of momentum with young supporters of the Jaguars. The team is playing well, and the city of Jacksonville is really on fire. And I think, you know, dealing with this, you know, under the leadership of a new mayor, you know, I think there's going to be a lot of support for Mayor Deegan and those things that she chooses to pursue and advocate early on. So I think there might be a window here that we could get something done, assuming we can get to the agreement that works for all parties. So I didn't mean for all this to be about the stadium, but that's about the only thing people ask me about these days. And I did want to share with all of you to set the stage for any questions you might have. But also, if you want to ask any other questions on the things you're really interested about, which is the football team this year, I'll be happy to do that. Yes.
How's the family?
My family's great, Joe. What a wonderful question to ask. That is, you know, I have 3 grown children. Jill's met most of them. 2 of the 3 have moved to Jacksonville since I came down here. So we have 5 of our 7 grandchildren live in Jacksonville, soon to be 6 of 8 in a couple of weeks when my daughter Lauren has her 4th child. And my wife and I love it here and are never going to leave. Thank you for asking.
Mark, we appreciate all you do in the community. Season ticket holder almost since day one. Even though it may cost a little bit more, is there some momentum about potentially the project lasting a year longer than staying in Jacksonville rather than going to Daytona, Orlando, Gainesville? Thank you in advance.
Yeah, that's a good. The question really has to do with how we go about the renovation. Our original plan, and again, it's just a plan. We can't do it on our own. Is that we do it in the quickest way possible, in the least disruptive, and the least expensive. And if you're going to do that, then the best way to do it is probably go to go temporarily to a stadium that's just about ready to host an NFL game. The two stadiums closest to Jacksonville would be Florida Field in Gainesville and the Camping World Stadium in Orlando. But you know, there's another path that you can go where you can stretch the construction out over 4 years, and you can go at 10 games in the stadium while it's under renovation. That's not ideal. It has a real benefit of keeping the games in Jacksonville. The trade-off on that will be the cost. It'll be almost $190 million more expensive. It's going to take longer. And the experience of going to the games during that 4-year period is not going to be like what you have now. It's going to be going to a stadium that's under construction. You know, we're doing all the due diligence on all of these options. We know it's going to be something that the city's going to want to determine as part of our negotiations. But the reality is, we really hope we have to deal with that issue, because that means we've got a deal on the stadium. And then it's what do we do while it's under construction? So it becomes a moot point if we don't get to a deal. And it will be something, like I said, we're doing all the due diligence we can. We're talking to that issue amongst our stakeholders. And then we'll deal with it, you know, as part of an overall agreement.
Just to touch on that same question in a way, so, and I'm hopeful you'll get the stadium done. I think it's a great idea, so I fully support that. But you're gonna move the team out of Jacksonville for 2 years during the heart of when this team is gonna be probably the best that we've seen in a while after many years of struggle. So how do you keep that excitement going? What would your plans be to enhance fans' experience around the stadium, or some kind of movement to keep that excitement going in the city? I think that's a big.
It is absolutely very, very fair question. It's sort of dealing with some short-term pain in order to ensure long-term presence of the National Football League for generations to come. So it's a little bit of that trade-off. So what do we do during that period? You know, our fan base is pretty big. There is a segment of our fan base that are season ticket holders. And then there's an even smaller segment of our season ticket holders that actually attend every game. Our average season ticket holder attends less than 4 games a year, which is actually pretty good. That's higher than the average in the National Football League. But that's a sliver of our fan base, a critically important sliver, but it's not the entirety of our fan base. So what we would need to do is make sure we have as many initiatives as possible to keep those Jaguar fans who choose to attend the games engaged with the franchise. So if we are playing in Gainesville, as an example, that we're providing buses, that we're not requiring those fans have to purchase tickets to protect their season ticket seniority, as that we work on travel packages, but probably just as significant, that we do major activations in Jacksonville on those game days. So whether it's, you know, having major viewing parties, opening up Daly's Place would be the easiest, but having multiple large places where people can gather, you know, maybe on one of the parks downtown, maybe doing something at Met Park, to give people the opportunity to come and celebrate with their fellow Jaguar fans when that's going on. But you're right, it's not an easy issue to solve. Teams have done it both ways. You know, Miami did their renovations over a 3-year period. They continue to play their games. Our renovation is much more complicated than that. Minnesota, Chicago, they moved out of their stadiums. The Bears went to Champaign, Illinois for a year. Minnesota went to the Vikings went to the University of Minnesota Stadium. So it's done both ways. And at the same time, continue to see if we can find a way to compress that construction schedule and to make that trade-off. The best thing in the world for our football people would be to have no disruptions. They don't like things to change from day to day, much less from week to week. And so we'll do everything we can to try to address that, if that's the direction that our agreement with the city takes us. Yes, sir.
How does not having any state funding make it more challenging to sell this?
It makes it more difficult, particularly when you compare to agreements that have been done in other small NFL markets where the state does participate. The reality is, other than a small contribution about 30 years ago, the state has done nothing to keep the Jaguars in Jacksonville. So just to put everything into perspective, when the old Gator Bowl was originally renovated, this is going to shock you. It was going to be renovated at the tune of $120 million. 100% of that was being paid for by the city of Jacksonville, and in the state of Florida, allowed the city to retain up to $2 million in sales tax receipts that were now going to come from the stadium, sales tax that didn't exist. And, you know, the city then used that to underwrite some of the bonds that went into the original construction, and it supported about $30 million. Okay? So 100% of the renovation was being paid for by the public, 90 million from the city of Jacksonville, 30 million from the state of Florida. The team was responsible if they made any changes to the design or if there were any cost overruns, and there were about $20 million in cost overruns. So that $120 million project cost 140, with the public paying 120, the team paying 20 million. The team did not want to put the 20 million, as an aside, the team didn't want to put the $20 million in. They wanted the city to finance it for the team, which the city agreed to do. So what the city did then is they agreed to have the Jaguars just pay them a little higher rent for the next 30 years. And that was basically covering that $20 million. So in essence, it was like covering the interest and the principal on it, $20 million. But since that time, that 140 million invested in that stadium has grown to 550 million. Everything above the 140 and the 550 has been funded 100% either by the city of Jacksonville or the Jaguars. And if you take a look at the total 540, of all the dollars that have gone in that, 67% has come from the public. The team has paid for a third. So of the 540, the team's paid for a third. And if you take that 67% from the public and take out that original money from the state, the city of Jacksonville is paid for 60%. So 60% of every dollar that's going in there has come from the city of Jacksonville. All of the agreements that we've done in recent history, with the most current being the Miller Electric Center, they remain publicly owned buildings. Like the Miller Electric Center is owned by the city of Jacksonville. Daly's Place is owned by the city of Jacksonville. But the Jaguars contributed 50% of the cost of that city-owned building. And we agreed to enter into long-term leases to use that building, and we agreed to cover any cost overruns as it relates to the building. So when we had this non-binding memorandum of understanding on the framework, which was really a path to go forward, this document identified all the issues that we had to negotiate. There were examples in there about the Jaguar saying they split the cost of this 50-50 with the city. That wasn't something we just pulled out of the air. That was exactly the deal we've done with the city the last 3 times the Jaguars have invested in city. So it does make it harder. There's no question, but it's been hard the last 30 years too. That's a very good question.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Everybody here, please make sure to grab your umbrellas on the way out.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lamping. That was certainly a fascinating presentation. We appreciate it very much. Certainly, I speak on behalf of the group when I say and we're rooting for an amicable deal for both sides. And thank you for your support of our club. You're here almost every year for us, and we really appreciate that. So just a couple of reminders before we go. Like I said earlier, no lunch meeting next week. Our first evening social here at Tijuana will occur August 9th. Please join us August 16th when our speaker will be Maureen Murcho. She is the Chief Development Officer of the Museum of Science and History right here in town. So be sure to RSVP again for our social on the DAG TV calendar. Now I'd like to have Ed Lombard lead us in the 4-way test.
The 4-way test of the things we think, say, or do first.
Those of you who have played football know you can't repeat much of what a football coach says, but I will say this from a coach I used to have. Success is not owned, it's leased, and rent is due every day. It'll make a difference in the world.
All right. So